Let's say our blessing together. Baruch
Baruch
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitanu
Divrei Torah.
Praise to you, Lord our God, rule the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and command us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So here we go. Morris, would you read our On One Foot, please?
Yes. Hannah was a woman whom the rabbis chose as a model of prayer. In her case, she was praying for a child. She became the mother of the judge and prophet Samuel. She has become an inspiration for Jews suffering from infertility, and her story is the Haftarah for the first day of Rosh Hashanah.
Thank you. All right, so this is a story that affects many people in the Jewish community, or touches on the experience of many people in the Jewish community. And whatever you bring to this experience, I hope you'll feel comfortable sharing wherever you are in this story. So we're going to go start with Act 1 now. Phil, would you read Act 1, please?
Sure. There was a man from Ramatayim of the Zuphites in the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Yeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had two wives, one named Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah was childless. This man used to go up from his town every year to worship and to offer sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh. Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord there. One such day, Elkanah offered a sacrifice. He used to give portions to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters, but to Hannah he would give one portion only, though Hannah was his favorite, for the Lord had closed her womb. Moreover, her rival, to make her miserable, would taunt her that the Lord had closed her womb. This happened every year. This happened year after year. Every time she went up to the house of the Lord, the other would taunt her so that she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why are you crying? And why aren't you eating? Why are you so sad? Am I not more devoted to you than 10 sons?
Thank you.
Context. This is the very beginning of the book of 1 Samuel. There was no temple in Jerusalem yet, so people went to Shiloh, since that's where the Ark of the Covenant was. 1, at what point could this story have turned out differently?
All right. Thank you, Phil. So, at what points could this story have turned out differently?
If her husband had been more empathic, rather than making it about him, she may not have gone to the temple. But he responded in a way that, unfortunately, well, the way some husbands may respond, what about me? Aren't I better for you than 10 sons? If he had really talked to her about why she was crying, what that meant to her to become a mother, she wouldn't have had the need to go to show probably.
Where else did people
Maybe Peninnah could have been a different type of person if the husband had said to her, what you're doing is very unkind.
David?
Yeah.
May I try something that, given how much better the ancient Israelites were than many of the surrounding societies, it just would never have happened, but I'll try anyway. But if the Jews had said, that polygamy thing didn't go so well for the matriarchs and the patriarchs, maybe we should kind of give up on the polygamy thing, unless, of course, it's a king who makes marriages for reasons of state policy.
Hmm.
Perhaps she could have decided to maybe rebuke Penina herself. She could have done that as well, and that would have had at least I think would have had a pretty big impact on the way it went, the way it played out if she just directly, I guess, spoke against her herself.
All right, second question. Did Elkanah make the right choice to give a portion of the sacrifice to his wife Penina and portions to each of her kids while giving one portion to Hannah?
What was the portion? What did it consist of, David?
Like a piece of meat, a piece of the
Oh,
sacrifice.
okay. Well, they had to eat.
Right. No, the question is not should he have given food at all, but the question was, did he distribute it in an equitable way?
And he distributed it like way less for her since her womb was closed, correct?
Right. Team Hannah got one. Team Penina got a lot more.
I have, just out of a family observation, my grandmother had 5 children, and one didn't marry, and 2 had she had 4 grandchildren from each of 2, and 2 from each of the others. And the other 2, who only had 2 children, it was a case where they couldn't have any more children. So when my grandmother distributed her estate, she distributed to one portion to each of her 5 kids, and their share they had to distribute, but she gave equally to each of her 5 kids. She didn't give per grandchild. So this is a case where he could have done the same.
I wonder if Elkanah also violated a Torah prohibition. Particularly, I'm reminded of the one related to not shaming people publicly. Because clearly, even if it wasn't meant as an act of favoritism, it certainly could have come off that way to everybody around them, the priests officiating the ritual, and also based on the way Penina is already acting, we could assume that Elkanah would have at least some awareness of that, potentially. So may also in and of itself be a Torah violation being referenced here.
Quite
I
possibly.
don't know, I might be reaching a little bit. That's how I read it.
If he had given as much to Hannah as he gave to Penina and her kids, wouldn't a lot of that have gone to waste? Because she couldn't eat that much and it would probably be spoiled.
Well, it's sacrifice, like it's to sacrifice, correct? It wasn't.
No, it's from the sacrifice.
Oh,
From the sacrifice to eat.
David, was there a custom or a rule then about distributing the sacrifice among members of one's family?
The custom was that everybody got food. It was not to my knowledge, there was not a hard and fast rule about what to do when you had lopsided spousal offspring situations.
If they all sat at the same table, they would have all eaten their fill and there would have been no question about what's going on.
I also think
Family style.
I think it's kind of an unfair question to ask if it was fair of him to only give her one and everybody else. Because I mean, we're viewing this from today's lens whenever, you know, it should be people are held equally, whereas back in that time, I assume women were held at a different, you know, level, and you know, birthing was a part of that. And I mean, I think that that would not stand in today's standards, but I mean, if that was typical in the customs of that time, you know, obviously we're going to come up with different moral judgment than what they had historically.
The question is, what is equal? Is equal that each person gets one? Or is equal that each like branch of the family, so to speak, gets the same amount?
The question of equal treatment is a difficult one in so many situations. Is it a question of, it's often said, a question of equal treatment, everybody gets the same regardless of need or circumstance, or a question of treatment as equals, say, and regarding their individual circumstances. But here, I think we have to at least consider that it says in verse 5, at the end of verse 5, for the Lord had shut her womb. Now that might just be a way of describing the situation, or it might mean that in people's minds it was somehow deserved, which is a very painful idea, but it's used as a justification for mockery. So I think that it kind of throws the question over into something else. Is there any judgment on her because of that at that point in the story? If that's all we have to go on.
Let's go into the next question. This pairing of an infertile but more loved wife has come up before. We have Rachel and Leah, we have Sarah and Hagar, now we have Penina and Hannah. Why is Penina choosing to taunt Hannah?
Well, she may have been jealous because she noticed that Elkanah preferred Hannah to her, or just that she wasn't an extremely nice person. I think it's jealousy.
It would be interesting to understand who he married first.
That's a good point.
You know, I think that Elkanah, kind of set this up in a way, you know, that, I mean, if he favored Hannah more, Penina would be jealous, and you know, then the fact that he tolerated Penina taunting Hannah also, I think, is a problem.
In the last line, he says, "Am I not more devoted to you than 10 sons?" So Penina might, well, I think that's what we were saying earlier, that she might see the fact that he is more devoted to Hannah. So So she taunts her. I had another thought, but I forgot what it is. So,
Well, the other thing that I think about is kind of like when you have children, and let's say you have your first child, and then you come back with another child after that. Well, your first child is kind of thinking, well, what's going on? I was the favorite, and now you bring somebody else in, and I have to share, your love with another person. And
Good point.
so there's a jealousy there.
Isn't this a story of Sarah and Hagar?
Say that again.
Isn't this the story of Sarah and Hagar when she was taunting Sarah because she had a child and Sarah didn't? This is the repeat of that.
That may be precisely one reason why this Haftarah is done during Rosh Hashanah. Good catch.
I guess one could ask the question as to whether or not both of these stories actually occurred, or one was simply a folk tale after the other one was known. For example, did Peninnah come into the family after Hannah couldn't have children? Just like Hagar came into the family because Sarah couldn't have children?
The rabbis assume that Hannah was the first wife,
Exactly.
and they assume that because she's named first. But they're working off the same text that we're working off of. So one could make a competing claim that Hannah is named first only because she's the protagonist. However, the idea that Hannah couldn't have children and that's why he married Peninnah does seem like a very plausible explanation of how this situation developed.
Given the commandment of pru, it seems like in ancestral times, and perhaps in some extent certain communities today, to have a lot of children is a lot of yichus. Even in Israel, they pay you for each child that you have, and just to grow the population. But also, it's a form of status to have a lot of children. And so Peninnah may have felt that she had more status in the house than Hannah, and she had a right to taunt her because she didn't have children.
Yeah, and pru is what God said to Adam and Eve of, quote, be fruitful and multiply. So it's this idea that one should have at least child, if not children.
If that's true, why would God have closed any woman's womb? Not that we can understand God's motives, but
Doesn't Rashi understand the statement in relation to Adam and Eve as a blessing rather than a command?
That sounds likely.
I can pull up the source, but I think I remember reading that. In which case, I guess the answer would be that it's not a mitzvah, but it's a literary device.
Hmm.
In relation to the Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
And I guess also the laws of Noah, because I think it's repeated in Genesis 9 as well.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, it is often seen as a command, but Rashi, the great biblical commentator of the 11th century, understood it as a blessing rather than a commandment. All right, next question. How might Elkanah be feeling in the face of Hannah's feelings?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. How might Elkanah be feeling given Hannah's feelings at the end of this section?
Frustrated. But he couldn't do anything to make her happy.
He's foolish.
He basically said, am I not enough?
And did you say something?
I said he's clueless.
Clueless.
He just acts as though he's, and I understand why would you be crying just because you can't have children? I mean, that's ridiculous. And it's almost making a mockery of her instead of really trying to sit down and talk with her, understand what's going on, why it's so important to her.
So the next question then is that Hannah could be read as depressed because she's crying, not eating, and, quote, so sad. What would be the more useful thing for Elkanah to respond with?
He could try and understand, talk to her and understand why she felt the way she did, instead of just brushing it off. He's saying, am I not more devoted to you than 10 sons? But that doesn't make her feel better. I don't think that necessarily makes you feel better. It doesn't make the problem go away. So he
No,
could.
but I think that shows that he did understand why she was sad, because she couldn't have children. He understood it. He didn't know how to deal with it.
No, I don't see that he understood. He's saying, you're sad, so aren't I enough? Am I not enough? Is what he's saying. But he's not understanding that, in a sense, there's an emptiness there. And I can only speak from what my sister-in-law has said, because she couldn't have children, that there's an emptiness there, and it's really hard to understand it. I don't think he understood that.
I want to stand up for the man, if I may. I've always taken this. I mean, his words are so simple. I mean, we have this word devoted, but I mean, he says, "Am I not better to you than 10 sons would be?" It's a sign of I don't say that he's not clueless, but from a certain point of view. But it's hard to know what he's supposed to do. It could be a cry of anguish because he loves her, he's fond of her. And so he says, well, you could have the sons, or you could have, I'm better than the sons would be to you because that's all I can do. So you can certainly look at it the other way. I understand that, but it's a story of in a certain framework where, I mean, compare him to Manoah. Is that the father of Samson?
Yeah.
Who's sort of he's blatantly clueless. I mean, the story is comical. There's no I don't see any comedy here whatsoever on that thing. So there's a sadness all around because of it. But at least that's the way it strikes me.
This act doesn't tell us anything about how he feels toward the two wives. I mean, I take the case of Jacob, who was more fond of Rachel than he was of Leah, but he had more of Leah because Rachel couldn't have any in the beginning. So I'm not sure that he's clueless at all. When he says, am I not more devoted to you than 10 sons? He may have been devoted to her more so than he was to his other wife. You just don't have enough information here.
Well, I think that the way I see it is that if he married Hannah first and she couldn't have children, and then he married Penina, then it immediately puts Hannah in an unfavorable position. And to just kind of repeat the question and say, well, why are you crying? Why are you so sad? He's not really telling her that he loves her the most, even though he's saying he's devoted, but is his love for her any what's the word I'm looking for? It's not enough for the fact that she's not able to produce children.
All right. Let's see what Act 2 brings us. Carol Fink, would you read Act 2, please?
After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose. The priest, Eli, was sitting on the seat near the doorpost of the temple. Right to the Lord, weeping all the while. And she made this vow, servant, and will remember me and not forget your maidservant. And if you will grant your maidservant a male child, I will dedicate him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor shall ever touch his head. As she kept on praying before the Lord, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice couldn't be heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. Eli said to her, how long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Sober up. And Hannah replied, oh no, my Lord, I am a very unhappy woman. I have drunk no wine or other strong drink, but I have been pouring out my heart to the Lord. Do not take your maidservant for a worthless woman. I have only been speaking all this time out of my great anguish and distress. Then go in peace, said Eli, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of the Lord. She answered, you are most kind to your handmaid. So the woman left, and she ate and was no longer downcast. At what point could this story have turned out differently?
Thank you.
If Eli hadn't thought that Hannah was drunk and had not intervened and just let her continue praying on her own and not said, go in peace and, may the God of Israel grant what you have asked, maybe she would not have gotten what she had asked. And then we wouldn't have had Samuel, and the book would have been very different.
Indeed. What other choices did people make in this section?
I also think just the fact that Hannah was willing to offer in return, was willing to offer a male child of hers, dedicate him to God's service. She might have prayed, but not made that offer.
I find it interesting that all the priest said to her was go in peace, and that made her feel well enough to eat and no longer be sad. I'm not a psychiatrist, that doesn't seem reasonable.
Hannah has a certain gumption. Rather than getting very upset when she was told to sober up, she very, I think, naturally explained what is happening with her and why she's unhappy and what she will do if things are changed. And I don't know if the Nazarite sect was active at that time, David. Was the Nazarite sect active? Okay, so when she said, I'll not let a razor ever touch his head, she knew what she was offering to God. She knew the conditions of a Nazarite. And she's promising to give him to the Lord, which is a very huge thing for a mother. Our mother was really dying for a son to offer. And so despite that, and she offers it before she's interrupted by she was pretty specific about what she would do. And almost like God couldn't say no to her. But I like the fact that she didn't just quiet down and disappear when Eli rebukes her. She said, no, my Lord, I'm very unhappy. And explains it. I think that's really great.
Right. Next question. Why might Hannah have said that her child would be a Nazarite? no razor touching his head, dedicated to the Lord.
She specifically states a male child. She doesn't say a child. She says a male child because then it was actually more prestigious or a more appropriate thing for someone to have. And people got more excited about the birth of a male child than a female child. And one couldn't dedicate a female child to the Lord. That wasn't done at the time. It was boys who got dedicated to the Lord. So she knew what she was asking for and why she chose a male.
Mm-hmm. All right. Recognizing the time.
I'm thinking that,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking that she so wanted the experience of bearing a child that she was willing to make the
Your audio went out, Carol.
kind of a bar, I'll dedicate my child. Oh, sorry. A lot of traffic out there on 14th Avenue.
Carol, could you put your thought in the chat because it sounds
dedicate
really
my child,
interesting.
my male child.
Right. What might have been an appropriate response if Eli thought that Hannah was drunk?
But he could have offered her some counseling rather than just telling her to sober up.
All right, next question. How can you repay to God one of God's gifts to you? Hannah is saying that if you give me the gift of a child, I will repay this gift to you by dedicating the child to you. So now taking this out of the story and into your lives, all of us have been given gifts from God. How can we repay them back to God? And on that topic, Carol Frank put in the chat, I think Hannah so wanted to experience motherhood that she was willing to dedicate that child back to the Lord. All right, seems like that was a challenging question. Let's move on to Act 3. Carol Koenig, would you read Act 3, please?
Probably hear my fan in the background, but early next morning they bowed low before the Lord and they went back home to Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. Hannah conceived, and at the turn of the year bore a son. She named him Samuel, meaning, I asked the Lord for him. And when the man Elkanah and all his household were going up to offer to the Lord the annual sacrifice and his votive sacrifice, Hannah did not go up. She said to her husband, When the child is weaned, I will bring him, for when he has appeared before the Lord, he must remain there for good. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Do as you think best. Stay home until you have weaned him. May the Lord fulfill God's word. So the woman stayed home and nursed her son until she weaned him. When she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with 3 bulls. Can you move it up a little bit? Thank you. One ephah of flour and a jar of wine. And though the boy was still very young, she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. After slaughtering the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. She said, Please, my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who stood here beside you and prayed to the Lord. It was this boy I prayed for, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. I, in turn, hereby lend him to the Lord. For as long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. And they bowed low there before the Lord. At what points could this part of the story have turned out differently?
Okay, thank you.
I mean, obviously, if she didn't keep her bargain with the Lord, it could have turned out differently.
Mm-hmm. Who else made choices?
If she had a daughter, it would have turned out differently.
Mm.
I mean, it sounds like her husband. Oh, sorry, Herb.
Elkanah might have insisted that Hannah accompany him up to Shiloh and not wait until the boy was weaned.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say something along the lines of, we had some discussion on if her husband was, clueless about her or anything, but it sounds like he respected her wishes the whole time. And she said that she wanted to do that. And he said, do what you think is best. So, 2 there.
David, do we know how long a woman typically nurses a baby?
I would guess at least until age 2, possibly all the way till 3.
So he wasn't to the age when he could have petitioned, said, I won't go. I won't see her, I want to go home.
Yeah, no, he didn't have any agency in this.
Yeah.
Nor would he have understood what he was getting himself into, even if he had been able to object.
Right.
All right, next question. How might Elkanah have felt about his son being away from him all year?
Why were they separated for a year? Was Elkanah gone for a year up to Shiloh?
No, the other way around. that Samuel would be at Shiloh and Elkanah would only see him once a year when he came up to Shiloh.
He was probably very sad. I mean, he had other children, but so what? This one was special to him because Hannah was special to him. So I'm sure that was difficult for both of them.
One comment you made earlier, David, about the boy not knowing what was going on. I would have thought that even a youngster, when the mother left him out the child, he would have screamed and yelled and hollered after his mother.
Mm. Yeah. Carol wrote in the chat, since Elkanah left Hannah, I think he would have been sad but went along. Next question. How might Eli have felt to be given this 2 or 3-year-old child to care for?
What did you say? How would Eli feel about it?
Yeah, the priest at Shiloh.
We don't know if Samuel was the only child that had ever been left there. There might have been some before that. So he would have been experienced with the efforts, if you will.
Hmm. Okay, so recognizing the time, I'm going to briefly walk you through what happens in Acts 4 and 5. So Act 4, Hannah prays to God and has this song/poem where she basically says, like, thank you, God, and you raise up and you bring down, and you had caused, in not so many words, like you had caused my life to be terrible and now it's significantly better. Thank you, God. And at the end of that, Elkanah and Hannah went home to Ramah, and the boy entered the service of the Lord under the priest Eli. Finally, Act 5, they, in Act 5, every year, Samuel's mother, Hannah, comes up for the pilgrimage to Shiloh, and she brings him new clothing. And Eli blesses Elkanah and Hannah and says, may the Lord grant you offspring in place of the loan that you've made to the Lord. And they go home, and over time, she has 5 more kids, 3 sons, 2 daughters, and Samuel grows up in the service of the Lord. And I believe that is the end of what we see of Hannah in the Bible. So in the appendix, we have 2 more reappearances of Hannah. First of all, Appendix A, here's the full story, so you can just see it in one go. I'll skip Appendix B for a second. Appendix C, we have Hannah in the Talmud. So the rabbis are very struck by Hannah's prayer. She's the first person to pray to God in this way. And so they come up with how she is the model of personal prayer, how she speaks from her heart and like really means the words that she's saying to God. So here I've pulled the various appearances of Hannah in the Talmud. You can see what the rabbis note and how they make midrash of her stories. And then finally, Hannah has continued to be an inspiration to people today, particularly women. And so here's an article from Kveller, which is a website where people post personal reflections about parenting, Jewish website. And this is an article where someone wrote about her own pregnancy journey and how she was inspired by the story of Hannah and read that Haftarah on Rosh Hashanah day 1. And then later on, she was able to have children and continued to read that Haftarah each year, and how each year different aspects of the story resonated with her. So depending on where people are with their journeys towards and through parenthood, this story is one that's very resonant for a lot of people.